want to thank you so much. So welcome to Be the Hero and Rescue Yourself, a podcast and YouTube channel with Kelly Fuhlman, where I interview many heroes that I have met in my professional and personal life. So I want to introduce one of kind of an inspirational and kind of weird contact that I got a message through LinkedIn saying, hey, I want to introduce my CEO and president of this new organization. Can we talk? He goes, because I really, think you have an interesting network and I would love to talk with you on your podcast. I was like, sure, let's talk. I love folks reaching out on LinkedIn. So then I got to talk to Richard Ring, CEO and president of F3 Intelligence Corp. And what he does is really interesting. So welcome, Richard, to Be the Hero and Rescue Yourself. And it's kind of funny that we talk about rescuing because that's in kind of what you do. You find and rescue missing folks, but there's a lot more to what you do within your organization than just rescuing missing people. So give us a little bit of background about your company and your organization and what you do. And then we'll go from there. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. So F3 Intelligence Corp, to put it simply, it's a private intelligence firm. We started out as a private investigation firm, and then we quickly realized we were something more than that by the way we function, because we brought how we did things in our previous careers to the civilian world. Much in the same way an operator might become a private military contractor. Well, we are all former intelligence specialists in some form or manner or niche. And we created an intelligence organization, kind of like a miniature version of the CIA or the DIA. And then we have our for-profit company that works primarily for law firms, government subcontractors. And then we formed a nonprofit, which was the sole focus from the beginning, was to start a nonprofit that used our skill sets to find missing children and work missing children's cold cases.
Wow. So where did that come from? Where did the idea of, okay, we're going to start a nonprofit to find missing children or to solve missing children cases? Was it something that just popped in your head one day while you were working in the intelligence world of our military forces?
So it didn't pop in my head. It kind of landed in my lap. So I just come back from a recent deployment, and our neighborhoods were being terrorized by break-ins, people breaking into cars, people breaking into houses. And I literally just got back from doing human targeting. Mm-hmm. And I came back and I used the local sheriff's office's data from their own website to, within 48 hours, figure out who for 2.5 years had been breaking into everybody's houses, and basically put it in their lap. Hey, this is who he is. And by the way, he's working at Winn-Dixie right now if you want to go get him.
Oh my gosh.
And then it was maybe a month later that a friend of mine who is a detective reached out to me and said, hey, I don't know how you guys do what you do, but I know you find people. That's what you guys do. We have a missing kid. He's mentally handicapped and he's wandered off, and we're going on day 3 to day 4 right now. And being where we're at and how hot it is, if we don't find him by today, he's most likely going to die from dehydration and the elements. Yeah. So can you please do something? I have no clue what you guys can do, but can you do something? So myself, a geo analyst, and another analyst, we took a swing at it. And by the time he woke up the next morning, we had 3 different places that we told him to look specifically, and a dozen businesses that we knew for a fact would have to have that kid on their security cameras based on his pattern of life analysis and some of the things we had figured out when we were looking into him and researching him. And sure enough, they found him in the first place. So it kind of changed the way that the law enforcement was conducting the search. Instead of canvassing the entire county, we were able to narrow 3 very specific spots, and he was in the first one. And I think that was the light bulb moment where we realized, oh, what we do to find terrorists can be used to solve crimes and specifically help find missing people, and our goal, find missing children.
And you look at their habits instead of just, like you said, canvassing and bringing all these people just to kind of, get in their car and start looking at, 30 square miles, you started looking at these people's habits, or this individual or young person's habits, and was able to see, okay, this is the direction he's gone in the past since he's left the house, which is brilliant. And you never think, okay, this is how we find the bad guys. Why can't we use this to find children that go missing? So you say that you got back home from a deployment and finding bad humans. So tell me a little bit about your background with JSOC.
So JSOC, for many people, they might not have heard of JSOC. You've heard of our missions. You've read our missions in the news. I trust me on that. But you've never heard the term JSOC, most likely. We work very closely with the Central Intelligence Agency. We're kind of, we help them with the action arm of things. It's the dream team of special operations. So because of classified reasons, I can't name the units that make up JSOC, but you know those units, you've heard them in the news, and it's the best of the best. And I think the other thing I would say about JSOC is we're what's called black soft versus white soft. So white soft being like special forces, they help win hearts and minds. They actually embed with the local populace. JSOC's primary role is to hunt the worst of the worst. So the president has his list. He says, this is my number 1, my number 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all we do is go find those guys. And so you can kind of divide it between the intel side of the house and the operator side of the house. And the analogy I always use with people is with law enforcement, you have detectives and you have the SWAT team. Guys like me were the detectives. We were what's called human targeting officers, and you have various different intelligence specialists that specialize in maybe imagery, geospatial intelligence, signals intelligence, and we find them. And then we tell the operators, here's where he is, and do what you will if you want to go bring him alive. But go out and get him, right? Take him off the battlefield so that he's not doing harm.
Right.
The way the detectives would tell the SWAT team what door to kick down.
Gotcha. So how did you just wake up one morning as a young kid and say, I'm going to go into intelligence and I'm going to find these really bad guys? How did you say that where you are now is dropped in your lap? How did you get into JSOC? What was that path and what was that direction for you? How did that come about?
So I was that kid running around the woods with a BB gun with his friends. I didn't even have video games growing up. I was completely an outdoors kid. Kind of grew up on several acreage. So I knew I was going in the military, and never dawned on me to go into intelligence, but I was probably the only 7-year-old that could have told you about the Golan Heights and the Israeli-Palestine conflict. Like I was into politics since I was a very young kid. I wanted to be Indiana Jones. So I tried to learn every language I could learn. I tried to learn everything about everybody's culture. And so when those two things merged together, becoming an intelligence analyst in the Air Force was kind of a natural fit. So that's where I started. I started as an intelligence analyst, specifically an all-source analyst, where we're the conductors of the orchestra. So you have intelligence specialties where they do a specific type of intelligence, and the all-source analyst will take all those different types of intelligence and put them together so that the data means something. Gotcha. And they make the final analysis and present that to the commanders so that they can make informed decisions.
Gotcha.
From there, I was stuck in at a base I didn't like. And day one, I walked up to our flight chief and I said, I will take any deployment anywhere. I don't care if I have to sleep on the ground, just get me out of here. And a few months later, he came to me and goes, hey, I can't tell you where you're going or what you're doing or who you're going to be with. It's all data masked, but I think you really like this. And I think it'll be a good fit. And I ended up augmenting for one of these tier 1 JSOC units, my very first deployment. And when I got back, I had my badge for one more day on the compound. And I was literally knocking on doors with a resume saying, I want to come here. Look at the good work I did. And then one of the tier 1 units said, hey, come on out and assess. And so I went through selection and assessment with one of the tier 1 units intelligence squadrons and got in. And so from then on, I was permanent party JSOC with one of their units.
That's amazing. You know, how and I always tell folks as young kids, we kind of have an idea of what we want to do as we grow up. We don't specifically know, but we kind of start learning and understanding and what that looks like. And it's amazing that you've gotten into a role where you were able to hone in on your talents, hone in on your love for politics, hone in on your outdoors type personality, but then get all the training. And now you've got your own company, your own organization where you are finding missing children, and you're trying to solve the cases of missing children. So when we talk about missing people or missing children, or just, trying to find the bad guy, you talk about, pattern of life, or just someone's pattern of life. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and what that means, and how does that help you find missing children or find missing people?
Right. So pattern of life is at the core of what we do. All the other intelligence and tradecraft centers around that primarily when you're a human targeting officer. Pattern of life is, I'm sure, Kelly, you go to the same grocery store 99% of the time, and you go to the same 2 or 3 gas stations 99% of the time. You have your habits. You go to the gym, right? So I know that, hey, she runs at least 3 or 4 times a week, and she runs in the morning. I can start planning things around that, and I can start looking for choke points in your life where maybe I don't know where you are from 1 to 4, but I know where you're going to be at 4:30. Right. So that applies, with our for-profit, what we do in the private intelligence sector, but it also applies to finding missing kids, because what you do is you ask yourself, what kind of case is this? And then that kind of tells you how you're going to approach it. The same thing with hunting bad guys. Am I hunting a terrorist? Am I hunting a serial killer? Am I hunting a mafia captain?
Right.
All bad guys, but they're different kinds of bad guys. Some are loners, some are part of a team, some have a logistical support network. And so we use pattern of life analysis, and we mold that and fit it to what kind of case we're looking at. So with missing children, I'm looking at, is this a parental abduction? Right. Is this a runaway who was running away from a bad situation, and on number, the 5th time that they ran away, they didn't come back because they got sucked into something, maybe trafficking, maybe drugs, maybe they were assaulted and then left for dead. We don't know, but it's a runaway, right? And then there's always the classic stranger danger white van scenario, which I'd love to talk to you more about, just to educate the audience, because that still exists, but it's evolved a lot from the 80s and the 90s. And so I think it's important that people are aware of how it's evolved. But yeah, we use pattern of life analysis to pair that with what kind of investigation we're doing. And then that tells us where to start, so that we're not just doing this broad sweep of Amber Alerts, which you have to do the Amber Alert. You have to do the Amber Alerts. You have to do the broad sweep. But then there should be guys like us that are kind of like the scalpel that you bring in to do the fine cutting work.
Yeah. So you opened up a great conversation, because as you may have known, and you and I have talked before, I work with the Denton County Sheriff's Department, and then also graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy back in 2016. And listening to both those folks on the sex trafficking side and child abduction and missing kiddos, and then the white van, I try to educate and help people understand that, yes, the white van is still there, but it's a different way that they get those kids into the van. And 9 times out of 10, correct me if I'm wrong, it's willingly, because they've already done the work beforehand. They have groomed them. They have mentally gotten them into a situation where they feel safe to get into that van, and then they're gone. So correct me if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but let's dispel some myths so we can help parents protect their kiddos.
No, you're right. It's either 100% they willingly get in the van, or they at least trick them up to that point where they're at the van door and they can shove them in. But they groom them to some extent, and I remember growing up in the 80s, I was one of those kids on a leash at the mall. Because if you remember the news from the 80s, it was all satanic panic and kids being kidnapped. That's all of the news was every night at 6 p.m. So all the parents were putting their kids on leashes. I was one of those kids at the mall with a leash. And I probably needed to be too. I was pretty rambunctious kid. But the white van now, it's things like we see people pretending to be children on online gaming, for instance. That's something we see all the time. Even not when we're working our for-profit, we've run into that on the on the for-profit side, we have run into that too, where we are working a case completely separate. And then I hear something in the background while I'm in somebody's house.
Mm-hmm.
I go, hey, what did that person just say to your kid? Do you
Mm-hmm.
know who that is?
Right.
That sounds like a voice changer. I don't think that's really a 12-year-old. I think that's an adult. And we run the IP address and we do all this stuff. And sure enough, it's some 45-year-old guy in Washington. So people are not aware of who their kids are talking to. And the kids themselves are not aware of who they're talking to, because while social media and the internet has definitely opened up communication and flattened the earth and made it, now I can talk to somebody in Bangladesh right now. If I wanted to, I could just pick somebody in Bangladesh to talk to. While that's a good thing to some extent, it's also, now you used to only have to worry about your kid when you let them go play at the arcade. Now they're in the next room and somebody is grooming them and you think they're just playing Halo, and they're not.
Yep.
And then some of the scenarios we run into is they will play with these kids and talk to these kids through online gaming for maybe a year, sometimes 2 years, for a long time to build that trust. And then when they go, hey, I'm coming to Miami for the weekend, do you want to meet up? Like, I'm here on vacation with my parents, do you want to meet up? And then they meet up with them, because why wouldn't I? That's John 3:16, from Xbox. I've been talking to him for 2 years. So that's kind of some of the stuff we've seen is a lot of online, and it's getting younger and younger. 10 years ago, it was a bigger threat to high school age people, because high school age kids were the ones online. But now my 3-year-old is hitting the skip button on the commercials to watch YouTube. You literally have 5-year-olds chatting with people online now. These kids grow up knowing how to use these devices. So it's not a high schooler problem anymore. It's an elementary school problem.
So what did we talk about when we were younger? When first the computers came into the home, they said, have the computer out in an open area where the parents can see and hear what's going on with the kid. What happened with the video games? Because I see so many parents just put the video games in their kids' rooms and they just go into their room, shut the door, and the parent has no visibility and can't hear anything the kids are saying, and who's talking to them. I mean, what happened to that education? I just don't see it anymore.
And parents aren't even aware that most of these video game consoles now, they even have chat rooms and forums in the video game. So no different than your Facebook Messenger, your AIM, to date myself, in the video games as well. So they could be sitting there texting. So you're not even, because they're not even talking.
No, so you don't even know if they're really a kid at all.
I think the technology is outpacing the parents.
It is
what's happening, to where the parents don't even know some things are even a thing.
Yeah. Or even don't even know what to talk to their kiddos about at all.
Right.
So now that you guys are kind of deep set, because you've got your nonprofit organization and now you've got your for-profit organization. So what are some of the things that your organization is working on now, or can you talk about it?
So we started our for-profit first, even though the nonprofit was the ultimate goal, because kind of with our personalities, we knew we can do what we do very well. That was never an issue for us. But we had two things in mind. One, okay, we had 1 or 2 successes, but is this really applicable? Can we really just bring this over in the civilian world that easy and do this no problem and start finding kids? So that was a question for us, is it really applicable? Can we get some wins under our belt? Right. And the other thing is, okay, we're really great technicians, because at the end of the day, operators, intel people, like, we're technicians. We have a specific job that we're doing, right? We're not running the organization. Unless you're a general or colonel, then sure, yeah, you could probably run a business real easy, right? But for guys like me, NCOs, captains and majors, we're technicians. And so we were worried, like, man, we see all these guys get out and they fall flat on their face. They're really good at what they do, but they don't know how to balance a budget and run an organization. And so for us, it was, well, why don't we start the for-profit first? Because we're really so good, then we shouldn't have a problem separating people from their money to pay for our services, right? And we'll learn how to run an organization. And if we can run the organization good and we can prove on the side that this is applicable and it does work, then we didn't waste anybody's time and we didn't waste any money other than our money.
Right.
So if we're going to fail, let's fail with our time. Let's fail with our money, not other people's time, not other people's money. That's just kind of how we think. We don't ever want to be a burden on somebody else, type A personality. So we started that for-profit, and it went really well. Apparently we were really good at running organizations because we run it like the British run their train schedules. Like it's on time, everything
On
works.
time.
So that's when we're like, oh, wow, this is working. Okay, cool. We've got that plate spinning on a stick. Let's start moving on to the next thing. So we're solving cases by day, sometimes working with law enforcement to solve real crimes, sometimes working with law firms, sometimes working with these subcontractors to catch moles, corporate intelligence type stuff. And then when we should be sleeping, we're now working, hey, let's work this cold case that we got hit up with. But it was always kind of if you've ever seen the show Burn Notice with Michael Weston, it was kind of like that, where we got our cases not because we were advertising what we were doing, but somebody knew somebody and they said, hey, you need to talk to these guys. Because we didn't want to open the flood doors and be overwhelmed with people. Hey, we want to help everybody, but we're only a half a dozen guys at the time. So we were just taking cases that we were kind of handpicking, or a detective would slide something in front of us that was a friend of ours and say, hey man, can you help me out with this? And in our first year and a half, we've solved cold cases, we've solved runaways, we've solved parental and familial abductions. We've solved every kind of cold case or every kind of missing child case there is. And so we felt really comfortable this year saying, well, okay, I think it's time to hang the open sign out on the door for the nonprofit. Like, let's start raising money and let's start plussing up. And one of the big things for us with the for-profit also was designing an organization that was scalable. Again, this goes back to kind of our special operations background, where, okay, you give me X amount of money and equipment, and all I have to do is hire more guys and we can scale up.
Right.
Okay, we're doing 10 operations a month. Let's do 50. We can do 50. The only limb factor is funding and equipment, right? So we built the organization that first year and a half to be scalable, because we want to be able to go nationwide. We're even talking about international. We're working with people that are our equivalent in other countries right now. So that we can work in tandem and in parallel and kind of get organizations like ours going everywhere.
Wow. So I know that this is an opportunity for you to work with law enforcement in different parts of the United States. So what is your approach with law enforcement, when you first approach them about helping, and what's their reaction?
That was the biggest pleasant surprise to me.
Yeah.
Because within JSOC, we work with law enforcement. We have federal law enforcement attached to us, what are called LNOs, or liaison officers. I have tons of friends and family that are local, state, and federal law enforcement. So intimately familiar with the politics and the culture within law enforcement. And normally when you show up and go, hey, I'm here to help, they go, who are you? Get out of here. Like, I don't know who you are. Are you trying to take my job? It could be an array of things that you'll run into, but they're not always known for being the most receptive to outsiders coming in, right? Especially private investigators, or who do these guys think they are, right? So we thought, man, we're gonna have to really prove ourselves. But luckily, we got lucky with our first federal contacts. We were working a case, and we go in there, and the agent is like, hey, I actually deployed with JSOC overseas. I know exactly who you guys are. Hey, boss, listen to whatever they have to say. These guys are legit, right? So we were like, oh, wow, that was way easier than we thought it was going to be. And then with the local law enforcement, when we started approaching them about the missing children's thing, the reaction, we haven't had any pushback whatsoever. Everyone's like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, absolutely. Can you train us how to do that? And we're like, yeah, we'll train you all day, every day. Give us as many people as you want. So everybody's been surprisingly receptive, and that's just made our life easier. We really thought we were going to have to, play politics and get our toe in the door, but pretty much contact people and we give them our little elevator speech, and they're sold within the first 30 seconds, first minute. They're like, yeah, because it makes sense. Right.
It makes a lot of sense. And, they're shorthanded, they've got so much stuff going on, once someone goes missing, they only have so much time to work it before it's They've got something else to work on. So you guys can kind of see it all the way through more than they could.
And I think one of the things that helps us is we make it very clear. And for any law enforcement that might be listening, we're not trying to take your job, and we're not trying to do your job, and we don't want to do your job. We do everything short of putting handcuffs on people. And I don't want to put handcuffs on people. That's a liability that I don't want. So our pitch is we get you to the 1 yard line, pass you the ball, and you get to get the touchdown and take all the credit. We like living in the shadows. So take all the credit you want.
For ages.
Yeah. So our whole thing is we are there to do two things with law enforcement. We are one there. Okay. You got 5 detectives working this. Guess what? Now you have 12. Wow. Okay. We just doubled the amount of detectives working this. All right. That's the first thing, is bringing them analytical backup. We're bringing them analytical backup, doubling their detectives overnight on the spot. Now you have more eyes, more analytical eyes, not just volunteers canvassing, but analytical eyes who are, like I said, a scalpel coming in to do surgery. The second thing we do is we try to bring material support that maybe they can't afford or have never even heard of in some cases. We have devices, equipment, and methodologies that they've never heard of, that we knew existed because of what we did previously. And now that stuff is starting, like typically you get something, we get the cool stuff. Nobody knows it even exists. And then about 5 or 10 years later, it starts slowly trickling into the commercial civilian market. So you don't know what you don't know. So we can show up and we can say, hey, you guys want to use this thing? You didn't even know this existed. This was a capability that you could have, right? And it's
They're
one
probably
thing
like kids in a candy store. Wow.
So it's one thing. Sure, if you're New York City Police Department, if you're Miami PD, we're probably not going to wow you. You probably have stuff that's equivalent or better than what we have. But for that smaller police department in Colorado, it's something as simple as a drone. Maybe maybe they don't even have a drone, right? They can't afford a drone. They've got 12 police officers on duty.
Yep.
So we show up and we got drones and IR and all this other stuff, plus our analytical methods. And like I said, if you're a police department of 12 or 20, how many detectives do you even have?
Not very many.
3, right? And they're not even specialists. They have to be a jack of all trades detective. They're working everything from the burglary to the murder in their county. Yep. So I think that's where we win them over, is we're just there to help. We're literally here to show up. You break glass in case of emergency, we show up. That's on the dynamic side. On the cold case side, our website is called nocaseiscold.org because of 2 reasons. One, we are working on a proprietary method that will bring artificial intelligence into things so that somebody is always looking, even if that somebody is AI. But also, if you're law enforcement and you're working a case and it's going on week 3 or 4, and now you have to move on to something else because that's just the reality of the situation, call us. We will pick it up where you left off. And then if we find something, then we can just tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we got a new lead. We think this is where the kid is. And then now you're back on the case. But the case should never go on a shelf. Yep. Our goal is that no boxes sit on any shelves ever, that parents know somebody is looking. And if it can't be law enforcement, then it's us. And then we tag law enforcement back in when we get something.
So now you have law enforcement that's open to having you guys help them. What are the parameters of a case? So they're open. They want you to take care of a case. What are some of the parameters that you put around a case before you take it on?
So we're not scared of any tough project. In fact, problem sets, when they select people for special operations, they do personality tests. And you're talking about my guys are the kind of people that you put 5 problems in front of them, they want to go after the one you said was impossible. That's kind of the one they want to do. So there's no parameters in which we would ever say, no, we're not taking that case. As far as what cases are the best and the fastest to maybe solve, if that's what you're asking, definitely cases where there's at least a suspect, because then it becomes a manhunting scenario, and we're the best man. I have no problem saying my guys are the best manhunters in the world. So if there's a suspect, easy. Like I could tell you some cool stories of how we find the slightest thread and we pull it. And once we've got a blood trail, you're not going to get rid of us. We are the modern day. I can't drop that company's name, but in the late 1800s, there was a company that was famous for being able to catch anybody. That's us.
Gotcha.
So if there's a suspect, that's great. If it's anything after 2010, I'd say, because at that point we know that the kid and the people around the kid are definitely in databases. You know, by 2010, everything's online at that point. You know, it's not in a box in the county clerks. So anything after 2010 is easy. But like I said, there's no parameters. We'll take anything. And we work cases. We worked a 40-year cold case and solved it in 3 hours.
Are you kidding?
So there are parameters in which we will prioritize cases, but there's no parameters in which we won't take a case. So, because I don't want to scare anybody off.
Right.
I always tell my clients, don't be afraid to ask us, because maybe we can do what you want us to do, and you don't know if you don't ask. So
closed mouth never gets fed. That's
exactly.
That's my philosophy on life. So, you know so walk me through what a typical work through case, maybe this 40-year cold case that y'all solved in 3 hours, or any other case that you want to highlight. Walk me through that process. What does that look like? You've got a 40-year-old case sitting potentially in a box on a shelf somewhere. Where do you start? What do you do?
That one honestly happened so fast that I don't remember half of what we did. I just remember that we called the client up and we said, hey, your son's actually getting ready to retire from the military and he's highly decorated if you want to go see his retirement. His son was taken within, I think his son was only 6 weeks old when he was taken. And so the child's name was changed. The person that took him changed their name, and you're talking 1970s, I believe. And so definitely the internet is not a thing. There's no online databases, right? So for somebody to change somebody's name in the 70s, that's going to be a hard trail to follow, because the digital trail is going to end almost immediately, and you're not going to be able to go any further with that. Especially if you're talking about a child, because that means that they never were of legal age to use their real name. And what I mean by that is that kid never paid a utility bill in his life under his real name. He's only used his fake name. So I think that one honestly was such a blur, and I don't even know half of what my guys were doing, but they just within 3 hours were calling the guy. But I think one of the most interesting cases was a parental abduction, where the one parent didn't get the custody, so they just took off. They took off, and law enforcement looked for several months, and it was believed that that person was getting support from their extended family or extended friends network to kind of live off the grid, that they had definitely left the state. And so eventually the case went cold because there was just no leads whatsoever. And I believe our first thread with that was we have a lot of proprietary and what's the word? The stuff that's not proprietary is not very well known, and it's kind of niche software that we use. And we just took the person's email. We said, hey, we always tell people, give us everything, right? We took the person's email and we just went, has this person ever had their identity stolen? And so we searched the dark web just to see if their email had ever been sold on the dark web, their email and password. And sure enough, it had. And so we had a password. We got a password off of somebody that was selling their identity on the dark web. This person probably has no clue their identity was stolen on the dark web, but we found it. And so that gave us a password. And then we backtraced the password and said, well, okay, search for anything else because if you have your stuff breached, probably all your stuff got breached, right? So we said, all right, search this password.
Bank accounts, emails, all of it.
And I think we're all guilty of using the same password too many times on too many things. So this password led us to another email that nobody had any clue about. And so because nobody had any clue about this secret email the individual had, nobody had ever looked at it. We ended up finding an Instagram account. And why, if you're on the run and you're a fugitive, you would still be using social media blows my mind. But they were using social media under their new assumed fake identity. Millennials are gonna millennial, right? So
they are.
So
gotta document what they ate.
This person's still taking selfies and sunset photos. Why they're wanted by the law? Okay.
Oh my gosh.
but nobody knows to look for what they don't know to look for, right? So
Mhm.
that was our first thread was, holy cow, we've got an Instagram account. And so first thing we do is, hey, when was the latest photo? Oh, wow, 2 weeks ago. Okay, that's pretty current, right? And there's a photo of the kid. Okay, now it's been a while, but there's a photo of the kid. And the first thing that we saw was the kid's wearing a mask. Okay, so that gives us a starting date of this photo had to have been like post-March, most likely
Mhm.
because of COVID. So that's when my imagery analysis guys, they start combing through every little clue. And if I showed you this Instagram photo of this kid, you'd probably pick out 3 or 4 things. By the time they were done, they had like 50 things highlighted in this photo that were telling them a story. They're looking at the shadows on the ground. They're going, well, it must be afternoon because of the comment in the photo. And the kid's wearing the mom's some of her work gear.
Mhm.
Okay. And so they go, well, it must be after school. She's picked up her daughter from the babysitter. So the shadows tell us which way north and east is. Okay. They're looking at what the kid was wearing in the photo with the comment, and they go, okay, the mom definitely has a job doing X, Y, or Z, probably getting paid in cash. Uh, the asphalt, they looked at the asphalt on the ground. They're like, okay, this asphalt is only primarily used like more Western type
Mhm.
states. Asphalt in Florida looks different than asphalt in New York,
It
looks
does.
different than asphalt in Washington,
Mhm.
right? Another thing, something I didn't know, this is why you want as many minds working a case as possible. One of my guys goes, hey, there's no reflectors on the road. And I was like, yeah, Missouri was the same way. I never understood why they don't put reflectors on the road. It's stupid, right? And he
Mhm.
goes, no, you don't put reflectors on the road where it snows
Mhm.
because the plows will rip them up.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, I've lived in states where it snowed, and it never dawned on me that that's why there's no reflectors on the road in states where it snows. Okay. So he's like, well, we know it snows wherever this is. They looked at the foliage in the background. That told them, okay, west of the Rockies. All right. And then with the snow west of the Rockies, the kind of the vegetation on the ground, they started assessing this was in the mountains above a certain altitude west of the Rockies. So he's saying, I'm thinking California, Utah. We knew it wasn't Nevada. And so they're just putting all this together. And then what we were able to do, because now we had something to go off of, we started looking into this person. Okay, give me a list of all their family. Give me a list
Mhm.
of all their known associates. We did have an address number, not a street, but a number on the back of one of the houses in the background. It was a 3-number address. So we said automatically kick any family or friends who do not live in an address with 3 numbers.
Mhm.
Okay. That whittled it down to like 20. Then we said, all right, kick all the ones that aren't west of the Rockies. That narrowed it down to 3 or 4. We start doing Google Earth, literally walking down the street on Google Earth. Mind you, I'm in gym shorts at 3 a.m. in Florida, right? So we're solving this case virtually. And we do this often where we don't even leave the office.
Wow.
And we're walking down the street, and sure enough, we get a match of some houses, and some of the stuff in the background of the photos start lining up with what we're looking at on Google Earth. And then we go, hey, there's a great aunt that lives 5 houses down from where this photo was taken.
Mm.
Sheriff's office moves in, kids in the house, mom arrested. So that's from the thing I would convey to law enforcement is this is what you can do if you just know the analytical techniques without even leaving your office. So when you actually put dudes in the field, imagine what you can do then.
Right. That's pretty amazing. So what happens? So after the sheriff moves in, grabs the kid, um, what happens after a kid is found? I mean, obviously I know in the military, and also we did this at Disney, we always had a debriefing process after to find out what was going on, what went well, what can we've done better, but what happens directly after you get a kid home?
So this is kind of one of the happy coincidences. Uh, the tier 1 unit I was at specifically, it's one of its missions was CSAR, search and rescue. They were if there's an American hostage, they have the SEER guys that are going to debrief the hostage. They have the psychologist that's going to take care of the hostage. They do the reintegration process. And so because that is in my background, not that I personally did it, but I was attached to the unit that does do that. I was very conscious from day one of saying, hey, the find, fix, and finish is really cool, but you have to do the follow-up afterwards. That's just as important, and it's the least glamorous part, so people don't think about it. So what I did was I brought in specialists to create an aftercare program, a reintegration program. And there's two reasons you want to do this. The first is to make sure that there's no follow-on cases. So for instance, let's just say we had one that turned out to be a child that was sucked into trafficking. We want to know, are there other children that we need to be looking for? In other words, did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Did you find any items while you were in that house that belonged to somebody else? So that's very important, and we do that with ops. When we capture somebody, we want to try to go on to the next objective by interrogating that person, questioning them, if it's a terrorist, to then find the next objective. Well, we do the same thing with a hostage. We ask them certain questions, we debrief them. There's a certain way that there's guys that specialize in doing that so that they do it the right way. And then they turn around to guys like me and they say, hey, I think I have another case for you. That's the first reason. The second reason then, of course, is taking care of the victim. It's obviously psychologically traumatic. And even if it's not a kidnapping scenario, let's just say it's a runaway that got sucked into something bad. I always tell people, kids don't just run away for no reason at all. They're running away from something so bad that they're willing to go sleep in the rain under a bridge, or have to do things to have shelter that night. So you're telling me that's better than what you just left, right? So you got to get to the bottom of that. Otherwise, it's just going to be a repeated cycle, or you could be sending them back into the lion's den, and then maybe they get hurt when you send them back to where they came from. So the debriefing is very important. And then we're building an aftercare program where we have doctors that will do the examinations that have to take place, psychologists that specialize specifically in trauma with children, down to even we have a dentist who volunteers her time doing Invisalign and braces for these kids just to give them, a morale boost. How many people say they lack confidence because they don't like to smile, right? They're ashamed of their teeth or something like that. So we try to get these kids not just the medical attention they need, the psychological attention they need, but we try to do something nice for them to give them a glimmer of hope that, hey, people do care about you, right? I get it. You were in a bad situation, but there are people out there that are good people and we care about you. So working with companies, we got a video game company that, hey, if it's a teenage kid that wants to see how video games are made, we'll give them the tour and give them the whole kit and caboodle and show them how it's done and let them make something. So we try to do some fun stuff with them as well.
That's a great kind of in cycle, because you're right. The big rah-rah session is when you bring the kid home. And then after that, then what? How do you help them, regain their strength and their ability to move forward and get back into having a happy life, and move past the trauma. So that's amazing. That's awesome. So where do you guys see yourself in 5 years? And that sounds like an interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, Richard? But where do you see the company or your organization in 5 years?
So we want to be utilized by every police department, every sheriff's office, and every federal agency where their mission aligns within 5 years.
Okay.
We want them to know our name, and we want to be on speed dial for them.
Gotcha.
And we want to have the manning to do it.
Okay.
Like I said, we've had big goals from day one, which is why we made this organization scalable. And so that's where we need people's help, is helping us scale up. We have proven and tested our theory at this point, and our organization runs like a fine-tuned clock. So I don't ever want a law enforcement agency to not find a kid because they lack the resources or the methods. And so that's our goal, is to bring everybody up to the same baseline and be there for everybody, at least at a national level, and to be able to respond to dynamic situations at a national level. I want someone to be able to blow out the door on a plane and be somewhere within 12 hours, which is the world we come from. That's literally like the way firefighters work shifts. We used to have a bag packed if you were on call for 2 or 3 weeks, and then somebody rotate off and now they're on call for 2 or 3 weeks. That's how we operate. So in 5 years, I want to see that scaled up so that we are 100% in every police agency, every sheriff's office, and every federal organization. That's the first thing. The other thing is we're working on a piece of technology that is going to provide every law enforcement agency, every sheriff's office, every police department, and even the federal law enforcement agencies, the ability to share intelligence and data as it relates to missing children's cases. It could be done for everything, but our mission is missing children. We've taken something that we used overseas. Intelligence only works if people can access the information I have access to, and I can access their information. Free-flowing data is how cases get solved and intelligence problems get solved. So we're working on something that we would be able to give these agencies for free, that would then, instead of F3 being a dozen guys, quote me if I'm wrong, I think there's like 700,000-ish law enforcement officers in the United States to some level, constables, sheriff's deputies, whatever. I want to put this technology in their hands so that now F3 is 700,000 strong, not a dozen.
And they're able to connect the dots.
It would be a force multiplier.
Yep.
So that's our 5-year goal. And for us, a 5-year goal means that we want to accomplish it like tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah. So you and I had a funny conversation yesterday or the other day when we were talking about these questions. And I always like to because you guys are used to working in the dark, right? And being a silent partner within our government and keeping us safe and keeping the world safe. So what's some interesting things now that you are all out in the public sector? What is the one interesting thing that you have found that y'all are struggling with right now?
So people have to understand our backgrounds. While I'm JSOC, we have guys that are former CIA, DIA, NSA, different soft units, some former law enforcement that were very niche specialists, like digital forensic specialists. So you're talking about people, in some cases, some of my guys' parents didn't even know what they did. They like, oh, my son works for the government. I think he works for the Department of State. No, your son doesn't work for the Department of State. Like he does way cooler stuff than that. That's just what he tells you. Okay. So you talking about guys that I didn't own a smartphone until a year and a half ago because I had to now.
Right.
I didn't have a LinkedIn. I didn't have an Instagram. I didn't have a Facebook, at least not any in my real name. Right. So my guys are the kind of people that had no outward facing presence whatsoever, very humble, and in many cases could not talk about what they did for real.
Right.
So now that we're in the private sector, and especially with a nonprofit, you have to raise money, right? Which means you have to come on podcasts. You have to have a LinkedIn. You have to have an Instagram. So this is bizarre to us. The first year, every time I made an Instagram post, my stomach twisted and knot a little bit, like, oh, I shouldn't be putting that out there. I shouldn't be posting on Instagram about what I'm doing. This is secret, right? So for us, the hardest thing is having that outward facing face. And then the other thing is, with our personalities, we are the first people to offer help to somebody, and we are the last people to ask for help.
Right.
Which is why so many things go wrong in guys with our backgrounds, personal lives, because we never ask for help. We keep it bottled up. We handle it ourselves. Man up. You just deal with it, right? And so now, when you're in the nonprofit sector, it's all about asking for help. That's what you have to do. So for us, asking for help, asking for the funding, asking for the logistical support is gut-wrenching sometimes for us to feel like, no, maybe we can figure out a way to just do it ourselves, right? I don't want to bother anybody. So getting over that I don't want to bother anybody mentality has been probably our biggest challenge, not solving cases. So
I can see that. And I didn't really realize it until you said something about it the other day when we were talking. So my last question, because we've got a lot of students right now that are looking into careers, into intelligence. What are some things that they need to do, or some steps that they need to take right now, either in late middle school or high school, to be able to map that path towards being in your type of position or role? Just some professional advice and maybe some advice of things they could do in high school now to help them move in that direction.
So the great thing about intelligence is there's not one personality type. Is intelligence is such a broad spectrum of jobs that, and we laugh and joke amongst each other about there are some serious personality quirks that you can almost say, hey, that guy is a signals intelligence guy. He is probably a really big nerd, probably plays World of Warcraft. That guy's a crypto guy. So the first thing I would say is there's something for everybody. Whether you're the football jock or you're the quiet kid that likes to solder stuff together, on a Friday night, like there's a place in intelligence for you. So learn about the different kinds of intelligence, imagery intelligence, human intelligence, all source, cyber, crypto, linguists, technical intelligence. We've got a guy who like 3D prints stuff and builds our hidden camera devices that makes them look like rocks.
That's cool.
And he's an artist. He really is. He's an artist. So even that artsy kid, there's a place in intelligence for you as the artsy kid. We need people that can make a piece of plastic look like a twig, for real. So we need people that can paint.
Right.
So that's the first thing I would say is be aware that there's literally a place for every personality type and skill set in intelligence, so that you already kind of can hone in on where you would probably fit into things. And then as far as getting into it, I think no matter what kind of intelligence, having a background in politics and history. So start cracking those history books, start trying to be that Indiana Jones. Remember how Indiana Jones could go into any country and he knew a little bit of the language, and he would say, oh, well, don't use your left hand, use your right hand for this. Like he knew a little bit about the culture. That helps. When you go into other people's countries, they don't expect you to speak their language fluently, but if you can show a little effort or that you at least know a little bit about their history, boy, does that open doors. So I would say definitely start paying attention to politics, start paying attention to history and how things actually work in the world. And then as far as getting your start, the intelligence agencies, it depends on which one it is, whether you can just go straight into it or whether you have to do something. But the military is probably your easiest foot in the door for intelligence. And depending on what kind of intelligence would kind of determine what branch you would go into. So I would say don't pick your branch first, pick your intelligence specialty that you would like to go into, and then see which branch. There's human intelligence in the Air Force, but if you wanted to do human intelligence, I tell you, go to the Army, because your odds are astronomically higher of getting it in the Army because there's not that many in the Air Force. So pick your branch second, pick your job first. Okay. And then when you're there, volunteer for everything. Try to be the best that you can be. Try to learn everything you can do. Don't be the 9 to 5, and I'm not saying pretend to work past 5, but because you're actually working. Yeah. And people will notice. The military is great because it's really one of the last semi-true meritocracies, where if you do good things and you do good work, you'll get punished with more work, but eventually you'll get punished into rewarding positions. Right. And so that's a great way. And then when you can either stay, there's guys that make entire careers in military intelligence and do really cool, spooky stuff. But then there's also all sorts of private sector and intelligence agencies that would love to snatch you up when you come out. Yep. And then the other thing is find guys like me that will mentor you and answer any of your questions. I'm always answering people's questions. I don't want people to make a mistake. Don't listen to your recruiter. He's not an intelligence guy. He doesn't know anything about intelligence. He's just trying to get you signed on the dotted line. So find somebody that's been there and done that and have them mentor you. Okay. Dress for the job you want and talk to the people that have done what you want to do.
That's it. Oh my gosh, Richard, I learned so much. Thank you so much. Is there any one last thing that you'd like to leave my audience with today before we say goodbye?
Absolutely. If you guys believe in our mission as much as we believe it, if I've convinced you today that we have a new way of doing things that will make sure that there's never a missing child's case that goes in a box on a shelf, please visit our website. It's nocasescold.org. And our company's name is F3 Missing Children's Intelligence Agency. We abbreviate it so it's easy, F3 MCIA, like CIA, but with an M in front of it. But nocasescold.org. If you want to go contribute or just follow us, we're always posting news articles and events. Please follow us. Please donate. Please help us any way you can. We've built this organization in a way that we make almost every penny that we get go towards nothing but investigations. We're a nonprofit actually doing what we say we're trying to do.
Yep. Yep. And I will make sure that all of your links and everything are in my YouTube description on my YouTube channel, and then also in the video, so you guys know where to go to be able to donate, to be able to look up Richard and his group and his team, to see how they're finding our missing kiddos out there and how they're helping our law enforcement go in for that win. And I just want to thank you so much, Richard, for joining me. Thank you so much for reaching out to me on LinkedIn. This is creating this podcast a year ago. I have been able to meet some really amazing folks who do some amazing things. And I am so glad that I'm able to use this platform to get that out, to help you create this organization and build it to where you want to have it in 5 years. So I expect in 5 years, when you have hit and you are working with every law enforcement organization, we're going to get back on here and we're going to see how things are going and celebrate a little bit. But thank you so much for being one of my heroes. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your service. And all of your guys, if they need some tips for social media, just tell them to give me a holler. I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast, Be the Hero and Rescue Yourself with Kelly Fuhlman. If you enjoyed listening to my podcast or watching this YouTube video, please follow or subscribe to my channel and walk with me through my journey of celebrating my very own heroes and an opportunity to learn the valuable lessons they taught me over the years, which allowed me to gain the courage to wear my very own cape and be the hero of my life. You can also follow me on Instagram at K Fuhlman, that's KFUHLMAN, at Facebook, /K Fuhlman1, or on LinkedIn, Kelly Fuhlman, MBA. Also, please leave your comments below because I see feedback as a gift, and it will guide me on how to help you gain the courage you need to rescue yourself. Be sweet, y'all. Thanks.